Well, our poll this evening is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? Is possibly unlawful. I don't know. The law is changing at such a pace in Britain. I've just been told you can now be charged for retweeting someone else's tweet if it is hateful. I'm not sure that clamping down on little Elon Musk, the imbecile, how does a guy like that get to become the richest guy in the world? He appears to genuinely believe that Kamala Harris is a communist, which either means he knows nothing at all about communism or nothing at all about Kamala Harris. I'll tell you later, Elon, exactly who and what she is. Kamala Chameleon, I call her. Now, the poll, is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist, is a binary one, yes or no. I don't write these polls, I quickly remind you. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, or on my Twitter, my X, on my YouTube stream, or on the YouTube community poll. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, or any other of the platforms that allow you to do so, please share with all your contacts, friends, followers, etc. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're headed towards 500,000 subscribers and are determined to get there in short order. Where to begin? Last weekend was truly nightmarish, and more footage has emerged of a man who's now been charged, for example, in Manchester, of all places, in a petrol station that I use. Well, let me quote the police. A man has been charged with affray, that's A-F-F-R-A-Y, for, I think the phrase they used, were advancing on a Muslim couple with a hedge trimmer. The early reports were that he was racing fast towards the couple with a chainsaw, and that's kind of how it looked to me. But the police know better and have charged him with affray. When I saw the footage, I was more afraid than affray. I thought that could actually have been my family in that petrol station. And my good wife actually asked me last night after watching the video if I thought it was any longer safe for her, an Indonesian, and my 3 mixed-race children with her, and I have 2 other mixed-race children of Arabic descent, if it was safe for us to continue living in Britain. And I can't tell you how sad that made me feel. It was a dismal affair. The state, for a while, looked as if it might be overwhelmed. And but for the grace of God in Rotherham, for example, but also in Tamworth, we didn't have an Odessa situation where an entire building burned down with everyone inside it incinerated. The mob that surrounded the hotel in Rotherham and smashed through the doors and windows and then set it alight. There's no alleged about any of this. I watched it in real time, live, happening on television. The Tamworth Hotel situation was even more dangerous. There were lots of people in there, and the fire took hold quite quickly. And the firefighters were abused and were pelted with stones when they arrived to put the fire out. These 2 acts were acts of domestic terrorism. And that's why we're asking, is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? Yes or no? These 2 acts, whether he's responsible in any way for them, these 2 acts undoubtedly constitute arson with intent to murder. That is, without doubt, terrorism, because it was motivated by a political idea, and that political idea being that these refugees, asylum seekers, and workers in that hotel who may have been as blue-eyed as me were all deserving of death because they were concentrated there in that hotel, in that refugee hostel. Of course, not every action that took place over the weekend constituted terrorism. Not everyone on these so-called protests was a terrorist. Not everyone there was a fascist, although fascists were there in number. The truth is that the legitimate grievances that the British people have, and about which I spoke on Wednesday, are so legitimate and such deep grievances that almost anything can spark a problem in our country, because the situation is dire in Britain. Our country is falling apart at the seams. It's going down the drain. Our country is in the grip of a deep malaise, which is not helped by the shrunken nature of our political class. I mean, in 1940, after the fall of France, at least there was a Churchill that could step forward and rally the country and describe a direction in which we must go and command the loyalty of enough people behind him to take us with him, take the country with him. We have no Churchills in this picture. When I listened to Sir Keir Starmer's belated Sunday night address, I could have been listening to the speaking clock for those old enough to remember it. Or for younger viewers, it was like watching David Brent of The Office. It was meaningless babble. It was meaningless babble that he was reading from a tightly written brief. He had to look down at his notes every 5 to 10 seconds to refresh his memory on what he should say about a grave domestic crisis that was obvious to anyone calling themselves a leader what he ought to be saying, but not obvious to Keir Starmer. There he is there, David Brent of The Office. Or at the third stroke, it will be 2 minutes after 7. The truth is, our media, our politicians, our economy, our society, our culture is very grievously wounded, bleeding, lying on the floor. I can tell you, now that I'm out of the country, how different it looks in other people's countries. Nobody is afraid walking around Rotterdam as I was today. Nobody's looking over their shoulder, looking for someone to come and hit them over the head because of the color of their skin or where they came from. Nobody is burning down their own shops, burning down their own libraries, destroying their own public realm. So shrunken have our people's ambitions become that even the looters are going for Crocs and trays of steak bakes from Greggs. In America, they loot Louis Vuitton. In England, they loot Greggs for a pasty. In America, they loot for Jimmy shoes. In England, they loot for Crocs. We're in a very bad way. And the politicians we have are not going to lead us out of it. And the mass media that we have shares responsibility for the emergence of that political class and its maintenance in power. A class with no ambition and no ability to change the direction in which we are. So a lot of these people, whilst no doubt infected by racist ideas, you can't have an empire on which the sun never sets because God would never trust you in the dark, and not leave imbued in generation after generation racist ideas, of course. There are plenty of racist ideas in our country. But they would not be moving people to the extent that they have over last weekend if it were not for the fact that we've got no houses. You can't get a doctor's appointment. You're unlikely to get your kid into the school of your choice. You will not get your potholes repaired. That street light will never come back on. The high street will remain shuttered. And where it's not shuttered, the province of pound shops and betting shops and urban dereliction. That's the truth of it. Our country is stricken by underachievement, by poverty pay, by pensioner poverty. Now more poor after the decision by a Labour government to cut their heating allowance, their winter fuel allowance. Our people are hopeless. Our people are directionless. And our public sphere and the politicians in it show no signs of being able to point the way and lead the way out of it. So tonight there's going to be 100 more protests. If that happens, it will be a Kristallnacht. It will be remembered forever in British history, because 100 protests of several hundred people bent on assault and bent on destruction can only lead to a Donnybrook. It will either be a Donnybrook between local residents and those allies of theirs that have turned up, or it will be a Donnybrook with the police, including the thousands of new police officers that have mysteriously, miraculously appeared, apparently from nowhere. Or it will be a Donnybrook between all three, but there will be blood. And so we've got to hope that they are bluffing, that they don't have the capacity to mount 100 protests this evening. We'll keep you posted as the news comes in. My advice to people thinking about it would be, where the police are there in significant numbers, leave the police to it. Let the law take its course. Because I'll tell you what the best gift to the Tommy Robinsons of this world would be: to draw local communities into counter-violence in self-defense, yes, but counter-violence in self-defense. That would be the greatest gift that you could give them, and would begin to change a paradigm in public opinion in the country, which is extremely disadvantageous to the Robinsons of this world right at this point in time. Even the Daily Mail has to condemn and turn over Tommy Robinson off his sun lounger in a 5-star hotel in Ayia Napa in Cyprus at the expense of the foolish followers that he has accrued over the decades of rabble-rousing on the right. Now, they may be bluffing. Maybe the Iranians are bluffing. The Egyptians don't think so. They've just announced a ban on all Egyptian air traffic going into Iranian airspace between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning, which, as I said, is rather odd, because it presupposes that this problem will start at 1 and finish at 4. And if it starts at 1, I guarantee you it will not finish at 4. That is an impossibility. But the markets in Western capital, stock markets, they don't think Iran is bluffing either. Of course, there are other reasons why the stock markets crashed, first in Japan, then in the United States, and then in several other big marketplaces. But the fear of an all-out war in the Middle East, which could trigger World War III, is a pretty good reason to dump your stocks and shares. They won't be much good to you if the world is going up in flames. Neither will money. But if you turned it into gold at the current prices, it would probably be the best thing to do. That is not financial advice. I'm the last man qualified to give you financial advice. And lastly, the tables have turned, but only for a few hours. Having collapsed their defensive front, the Ukrainian armed forces wheeled, retreated, and invaded Russia. Of all places, Kursk, the site of the mother of all battles, the mother of all tank battles, which turned the tide more even than Stalingrad in the Second World War. After Kursk, there was no doubt whatsoever that the Hitlerites would in the end be crushed in the rubble of Berlin, as they duly were in May of 1945. So to attack Russia, to invade Russia, to begin killing civilians in the streets, a pregnant woman just been killed, a whole carload of civilians travelling on a road just been killed in Kursk, is no doubt momentarily an embarrassment for the Russian government, but it will only last a few hours before it turns into yet another military catastrophe for Zelensky and his gang in Kiev. People are tired of Zelensky now, not least in Ukraine, where most people want him gone. But they're tired of him and of Ukraine in all Western capitals, despite what our political leaders try to pretend. Ukraine mania is a very distant memory now. If you don't believe me, check the avatars of people on social media. Look for Ukrainian flags anywhere in Western countries. Look for people rattling a tin for the Ukraine. It's all over now, baby blue. And that's what most Ukrainians now want to happen. They want a negotiated settlement of this conflict, which should never have occurred, need never have occurred. They want it brought to a swift end now by negotiations, while there's still something to negotiate about. While I'm on the subject, some people are criticizing me for welcoming the overthrow of Modi's tyrant in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has fled to India just ahead of a vengeful crowd. After nearly 20 years of dictatorship, people are saying to me, don't you know it's because she had good relations with Russia, good relations with China? I don't care about our relations with Russia or China. I care about Bangladesh. I care about the Bangladeshis who've lived lives of misery under her iron heel. I care about the political prisoners who have rotted in her jails. I don't care about the geopolitics of Bangladesh. I want the people of Bangladesh to be free to choose their own government. And while I'm on that, a good friend of mine was a Bangladesh MP by the name of Ilyas Ali. He disappeared and is believed murdered some years ago, almost a decade ago. I demand to know what happened to him. And I call on the new authorities in Bangladesh to investigate thoroughly his kidnapping and his presumed murder. I will not let this case go because Ilyas Ali was a friend of mine, and I stand by my friends always. Fasten your seatbelts. Going to be a bumpy night. It's the mother of all talk shows.